How are you guys doing today? It's Anthony Gangi. Welcome to another episode of Tier Talk. Hey guys, great discussion today. Me and Joe Pomponio are going to talk about what safety measures are put in place when an escaped inmate or offender returns back to custody. It's a relevant topic. I did get an email requesting this topic. Remember, we had the incident in PA at Chester County. That is their second escape. So basically, when you get the offender, and in this case here, he's not going back to Chester County, he's going to the state. What measures do we put in place to make sure that this individual doesn't escape again? It's going to be a great topic. Hey guys, before we start, let's get into our sponsors. So first sponsor we have is American Military University. If you guys are looking for a degree, seek higher education, please check out American Military University. They are very supportive of what we do here in corrections, very supportive of what we do here on Tier Talk. So guys, check it out because we need people with experience in those classrooms. We also have Inmate Manipulation Decoded right here. Great book, guys. It's available on Amazon. This book is used for training all across the country. So thank you guys for keep on showing this support for this book. And then we have How to Succeed in Corrections, Lessons Learned While Working in a Prison. This book is published by Blue 360 Media. That's the company that has it now. The link to that is in the description. And guys, there are tons of advice in this book. And as you can see, there's added spots for you to add your own notes after each lesson learned. There's about 159 lessons in this book. And I'm also working right now on a rookie book. We're at lesson 20 out of 50. I still got 30 more. And there are going to be lessons that are going to complement what's already in these two books. So it's a partnership. It's not all inclusive, but I do believe that if you have all three books, especially when the rookie book comes out, you're going to start to get yourself some really good knowledge. Because again, it's going to be the same format. A dedicated quote from someone in the profession, the passage, and then the highlights of what I feel is an important part of that passage for us to take in. Let's get Joe. What's up, Joe?
Hey, morning, bud. How are you?
Doing good, Joe. So, Joe, first off, let's introduce yourself real quick, and then we'll talk about a very interesting day you just had.
Yeah, my name is Joe Pomponio. I'm a retired lieutenant of the Texas Department of Corrections of 29 years and 6 months. I'm currently working for a local sheriff's department and panel member here on Tier Talk.
All right, Joe, look at the guns. Look at the guns on you.
That's from the tasing, man.
Right. So introduce the video I want to show real quick before we get to our topic. So what am I about ready to show everyone here?
So in the jail division, they're bringing in new tasers made by Axion, Taser 7s. And this was our taser certification class to learn the new proponents of the new taser guns and how they function. And at the end of the class, of course, and it was strictly volunteer only. So I volunteered to get shot with the laser. It was definitely pretty interesting. Definitely, it was a shocking experience.
All right, so let's play this video real quick, guys. Let's look at Joe shot a little bit. Here we go. Hold on.
Oh, yo, you got this? All right, name, agency. Joe Pomponio, National County Sheriff's Office.
Hey, so Joe, let me ask you a question real quick. Let me remove that. Hey, so obviously after getting shocked, what happens? Your body just kind of stiffens up?
Yeah, you pretty much lose all control, voluntary control of your muscle system, and you pretty much it's like the most intense tensing up session you've ever had. You all your muscles and your body pretty just goes stiff and rigid. You definitely feel the pulsating electricity of the current going through you. Kind of a thumping feeling, but 10 times worse. Once they lay you down and they pull the barbs out of you, I mean, the recovery is, almost instant.
Oh, is it?
Oh yeah, it's almost instant. It was 5 seconds of suck followed by glad that's done.
Yeah, I mean, and for people to understand, I mean, I get it. You gotta, if you're going to utilize these tools on individuals, then you also have to know how those tools affect you. I mean, we
Exactly, and that's kind of the reason why I volunteered to do it, because in order to fully appreciate what it can do and what effects it has on the human body, the only way to know is to ride the lightning and do it yourself. It definitely gives you a better appreciation of what it can do and its effects on the human body.
I was also I know for OC, I mean, we've been sprayed, is that part of the certification as well? I mean, if you're going to use the tool, you're going to have to know how it feels. I know they say, like, when you OC somebody, if it ever goes to court, they may ask you a question of, well, do you know how it feels to be OC'd? It's like, yeah.
And that's kind of one of the reasons why I did it. I mean, even though the company that makes the gun doesn't actually require that you get tased, it's pretty much it's left up to individual department policy whether or not they want you to actually do it to be considered to be certified. Really it gives you a better legal standing, because if you're on the stand and inmate's attorney asks you, well, do you know what you subjected my client to? Well, you're damn right I do.
Yeah.
I know exactly what your client was subjected to, because I was subjected to it myself. So, it gives you a little more credibility on the stand.
Yeah, I was going to say it holds a lot of weight there. Now, guys, this should be a quick dialogue. It's a request of, what are the measures that we take after we have recaptured and brought someone back to custody, knowing that they've escaped. So there's going to be balance in our conversation, because one, as much as people want to say that we have to be more aggressive in our approach with these inmates have rights, they have lawyers. So we have to do two things here. And this is why corrections and working in jails and prisons can sometimes be very, very tough, is we have to still balance the security needs of the facility. And we're also going to have to balance the rights and needs of the captured offender. So granted, obviously we do have a reason to put them in heightened security, but we also have to be able to make sure we give them what's within their rights, within those high levels of restriction. So first thing I want to mention, we have a couple of things we want to cover here is, okay, Joe, so this guy escaped from a jail. And again, this is really not specific to him, but, we'll kind of use it to move the story through. Now the jail has decided, you know what, let's send this person to a prison because they pose to be a risk. Now, even though the jail did have vulnerability, this doesn't escape the fact that they got stuff they have to work on. But at this point here, they're in no position to take someone here who is an added risk, because they know he has escaped and he'll escape again, probably, if given the opportunity. So with that said, the counties usually have deals with the state contractually. I'm sure the county will be paying the state because he's still he still would be a county inmate. But what's your thoughts on, basically, do you consider it upping a level when you take an inmate from a jail setting, or it could be in a jail setting, and now that he took off and he's come back, they're like, well, you know what? Hey, he's not going back to county, and he's not going to go to a neighboring county either. He's going to a state prison. Do you think that's upping the level?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, when one escapes and you get him back into custody, the first thing you want to do is keep him in a more secure and confinable environment. And if that means, you got to send him to a state, penitentiary, which, they may have a contractual agreement with. You send them to a state penitentiary, something that's got a high security cell, something that most county jails don't. You definitely want to. That's, once you get them back, the main object is to keep them there. And that means you got to send them to a more secure facility. Yeah, by all means. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think the one difference, because again, you're still going to have professionals at both facilities that know how to do their job. You should have professionals at the jail that can handle highly, restrictive inmates, and then you also have the prison. But I think the main difference here is that it's the long term. I think that the prisons are more ready to handle long-term restrictive placement, where the jails may not be able to handle that. It's not because they're not capable. I'm not saying that because there are
Right.
some jails that are. I'm just saying they may not have the resources to do that. Because again, jail is not really meant to be long-term placement. One of the major difference between a jail and a prison. But again, Joe, we on the same page with that? More maybe with the long-term placement of it all?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the county jails are just, as far as term wise, it's a temporary term until you're either bonded out or you're convicted and sent up. Whereas the penitentiary, when they build them in mind with, escape plans and higher security cells and more confinable, because, penitentiaries have escapes too. And, that's that most of those cells were created whereby,
And to be honest, guys, the prison system may hopefully have more resources when it comes to keeping that individual active in what would be maybe an isolated setting. I mean, they're going to be visited by service providers, mental health professionals. I mean, this will be done daily, possibly even at some level weekly by an administrative person. I mean, but again, we are more prepared, or at least, at a maximum security prison, more prepared for those long term isolated. And I'm going to say isolated because to some extent that's what may be where he's going to be, housing. So now, when the person gets captured and we go through the whole process of bringing them back to what would be the prison intake. Now, granted, some higher level maximum security prisons may have their own intake system, because you're going to have, like, so when you work for the state, there's usually a few intake facilities in which the inmates will come from county. They'll, after they've been sentenced, and they'll come to a centralized facility in which they go ahead and decide based on status, points, whatever it is, however they classify the inmate, what facility works best in regards to their needs, but also relevant, obviously, is safety and security. But there are some facilities that are maximum, obviously, the highest level of custody, and you got some inmates who are just going to probably go right to their intake, depending on how dangerous they are or how much of an escape risk they could be, whatever heightens that level of status. So sometimes what happens here for an inmate like this, he could go right to a maximum security prison without having to go through some centralized intake, because he can go right to that one facility, and then they could place him accordingly, because again, there are concerns with this individual being at a risk to escape again and posing a threat to society. Now, once they go through this process, let's do the first thing here. Obviously, they're going to be checked by staff. Same thing. We're passing the individual from the outside law enforcement to the inside law enforcement professionals. Those are our correctional officers who are now going to say, okay, this ball is mine. So what they're going to do first is they're going to go through their security measures. They're going to strip them down, because we don't, I know he's probably gone through a whole big process before he came in, but now he's us. We're taking full responsibility. So we're going to strip him down, take off the clothes, suit him up with a uniform that we have. And then we're going to go through the process of having the individual seen by medical and mental health. And I will say this, Joe, and if we want to revisit this part real quick, right off the bat, part of the procedure, because you did have the inmate escape, so he had a level of freedom, which we now just took away. We have to be concerned that he's going to try to hurt himself and kill himself, or whatever. So our first thing when it comes to taking an offender who has escaped and now bring back to custody is they automatically, even if they don't tell mental health during the evaluation that they're going to hurt themselves or not, usually the policy is going to be maybe 24 to 72 hours on a constant watch setting. And then he's going to have to kind of work his way down, because at this point, remember, he came from this level of freedom and we just got him. We just caught him. We ripped him from that. And now we got to make sure that he doesn't do anything foolish. So the best practice at this point is to put him on a constant watch, minimum 24, but I would probably do a little longer than that. And the constant watch setting, just so you guys know, is he's going to be under direct observation, minute by minute, second by second, by someone in a cell. So the officer will be right outside, or maybe watching a monitor, and the inmate will be in a cell, probably with a suicide gown on, probably a mattress on the floor, basically with very limited items, so they can hurt themselves. So it's a very restrictive setting. Probably the highest setting you can have is a constant watch setting. But what's your thoughts on that, Joe? The initial intake process, the exchange, the suicide watch?
Oh yeah, I mean, like we said before, once you get him back in custody, the first thing you want to do is make sure he's in a facility that's more confinable, more securable than what he departed to begin with. During the intake process, of course, there's going to be some sort of classification going on, and he's going to be reclassed, to a more restrictive level. In the penitentiary setting, when they first bring them back, they take them straight to a high security unit. We have roughly 6 or 7 of them in the state, and whichever one has an available bed, they'll take them straight to that facility. Of course, they'll strip them down and all that stuff, and place them in a cell. Normally the constant direct observations are for about 72 hours. Because usually after 72 hours, the head clears, thoughts are gone. You're pretty much got your adrenaline dump done from the past events, and from that point therein, it's all investigative. How did this occur? Why did this occur? What was his motive for it occurring? It's for the first week, it's pretty much a big to do.
Yeah, and I love what you just said, by the way. Now he is gonna. We talked about the constant watch setting, and it is a procedure that you step down from. So again, you put someone in a constant watch because you're trying to negate or minimize any effort from them to act out when they're going through this impulsive emotion, which is usually why we're watching them within the first 24 to 72 hours. Because like Joe said, eventually that adrenaline dumps, whatever it is, and eventually the guy may be thinking a little bit more clearly. But now the unique concern with this is that usually when you have somebody go through these levels of constant watching, it drops down, let's say, from constant to close, usually because you may feel that the person could still present a risk. You never know. The safety measures usually get them to bunk in with somebody because, likelihood with somebody in the cell, less likely for you to do that. But that's not going to happen in a case like this. One, for a couple of reasons. One, he's a risk for the cellmate. Obviously, he still poses a threat, 100%. You're not going to put someone of this caliber who next to someone who he can potentially hurt, because our job is to basically protect the other offenders. And you would agree with that, Joe, right off the bat, right? I mean, this is someone that has to be by himself. So now that ups our need to really be the ones being vigilant on him. So that explains why he'll definitely be in a close custody setting, because now we have to monitor him, the whole time, just in case he does do something foolish. We're there and we're able to respond. And I want to also add the other reason why we have to also keep him by himself, and which is the main reason why, is he's a jail inmate. He's a county inmate. He's not a state inmate. So you can't house them together, because they're always going to consider, even though he probably would be the greater risk is a prison inmate who can attack him. So if the prison inmate attacks the county inmate, the jail inmate, so again, just if even outside of here, this would play out for any county inmate being held at a state facility where they feel the state inmate poses a threat to the county inmate, there is going to be a serious liability or even a lawsuit pushed by the county because you failed to protect the inmate that we handed over to you. Would you agree with that, Joe?
Oh yeah, absolutely. You definitely want to keep the entities separate. They do that in the county most counties, they'll, if they have TDC inmates or ones that have been convicted and already assigned a TDC number and they come back on a bench ward or something like that, they try to keep them separate, just because they're two separate entities, two separate policy driven entities. And, especially when you want to take a county and put them in a state facility, their policies are more enhanced than what a county jail is. Therefore, you definitely look for liability and safety purposes. You want to keep them separated. Same reason why you separate juveniles from adults, males from females. It's all about the safety.
Yeah, and again, remember the county is still responsible for that individual, so they're going to be responsible for the choices they made. So when that individual goes to a state facility, the county has not washed their hands of him. Actually, they're probably going to have to check on him as frequent as they can to make sure there are no concerns, because the moment they notice a concern, it's their job to maybe say, hey, this ain't going to work at the state facility, blah, blah, blah. They become, I know it may sound crazy, they become like an advocate to some extent because of the liability that connects to if something does happen, the county may not be able to fully wash their hands from it because, again, they have that level of responsibility. All because he's been given to the state does not mean that Chester County doesn't have responsibility for that inmate now or the offender. Now, granted, when the when you get through the constant watch process, whatever it is, we do have to introduce this offender, the one that obviously escaped, whatever it is, to the routine of what the prison or jail, but in this case, the prison offers the inmates when it comes to their rights. So, like, you're going to have to, this inmate is not going to be able to stay in his cell 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. This is where the prison, I think, is more effective. This is where the long-term part of it all is, because we're able to hold people. I know I'm using the word isolation. I hate that word, but technically, he should not be sharing his space with any other inmate. And again, not because he's just a threat, but because he is a jail. He is a county inmate. He's not necessarily a state inmate. So having said that, we have to be able to introduce him to what other inmates we get. So again, you got to get him out into the public area, have some out of cell time. Yes, yard time eventually, because that's not going to be, something that he can automatically not get because he had an escape. No, they're going to try to just going to be more monitored, but they're going to try to introduce him to some level of routine because, the biggest fear here is if you have a guy and you don't, kind of give him what falls into some level of, not going outside of his cell, something that can mess with him mentally. If something does happen and he decompensates, you're always going to have a lawyer that's going to fight for this individual, and they're going to look at how he was housed and how he didn't have these opportunities to kind of free his mind to some extent, excuse the pun, but, and now, unfortunately, they're going to be held responsible. This is where the prison can really step up because this is what we're used to. We're used to providing people that are highly restricted with these rights. Because at the end of the day, all because a guy escapes from yard doesn't mean he's never going to get yard again. He's going to get it eventually, but we have to do it in a more controlled setting, a more controlled way. And also legal calls, legal visits. Will they eventually have him, just in general, because I got to kind of get away from just this one individual, but, for any escape offender, visits. I mean, don't forget, it doesn't have to be contact visits. It could be visits where there are no contacts, like that's done through a window. And, so what they could do is they could still provide the offender with what they're supposed to get, but they can make it more restrictive. Like, yeah, you're supposed to get visits, but you're not going to get contact. Yeah, you're supposed to get yard, but when you're in yard, you're going to be shackled. And you'll be able to move. We're watching you, but they're going to add restriction, but they're still going to offer what they're supposed to get as if they were regular GP, but just with a little bit more restriction and also less time. Like I know restriction could relate to time as well, but like if GP gets yard, I don't know, 5 hours a day, they're going to get yard 1 hour once a day. They'll figure it out. But Joe, am I right, Joe? When it comes to the higher level restrictions, eventually they have to try to introduce him to some normal routine. I think that is good for the pass off to go to the prison, because I think the prison is more capable of doing that. That's where the long term practice comes in.
Yeah, I mean he'll be afforded pretty much every right that an administrative separated, or or what us old hands call segregation inmates are offered. As far as recreation wise, visit wise. You also gotta keep in mind too. The first, probably I would say 2 weeks. Normally he probably won't leave his cell for any reason unless it's to go to a medical visit, in the in-house infirmary, because of the fact that they're still doing the investigation on this guy's escape, and they're trying to figure out, who was involved. Did he have any help from the outside, family members, friends, whatever. So they tend to keep the investigation pretty close to the vest and keep him on an investigative hold, where the only person he can really talk to or visit with is his attorney. But on the same token, you also have to afford them the same rights, and I know it differs, from state to state. Since he went to a state penitentiary, it becomes a question. Since he's a county inmate, do we afford him what the county has in place under state standards, or do we afford him what the penitentiary is supposed to give him under state standards? But either way, it kind of gets, I guess you could say, it prepares them emotionally and mentally for what's to come ahead, as far as routine, which is, it's a good thing to start it. It's not like they put him in a cell and throw away the key. And, it's not like that. He'll still be afforded some sort of recreation. It may be. Go ahead.
You hit something very good. I wasn't even thinking. So obviously you still have the old escape that they're still investigating, but then you also have the potential for him to do it again. So obviously the phones are monitored, mail's monitored. He's probably gonna be on some alert list. I also think at this point it would be justified to be searching his room daily, multiple times a day. And if he wants to push harassment, it's not going to work, because there's more than enough justification for the officers to be going in there.
Absolutely. I mean, because he's not going to have any property, because, chances are Internal Affairs has all his property, and they're searching through it looking for, did he have any pre-made plans? Was there any maps? Was there any letters saying, if you get out, I'll meet you here? So he's going to be very restricted in what he, and limited in movement in a lot of ways.
Mind you, that is when highly restricted when he's in the constant watch setting, but he will be allowed certain things when he gets released from that. And, custody will just have to be kind of, vigilant on what he has, and then basically going in there and checking it daily, and which again would be justified. I mean, you get a lot of inmates right now that, they let's say they try to make an escape, whatever it is, and custody finds out about it. So we start doing our searches and we hit them up every day. And, the lawyer's like, well, we feel like you're harassing our client. Yeah, but it's justified. So, lawyers, stay out of this one. Just stay out of this one. Because if you're going to try to argue, especially when you have an escaped inmate that has now been recaptured and, he has rights, and are you searching everybody else's cell like you're searching his? Literally, no. I'm going to tell you the truth. No, I'm not. But I can tell you why I'm doing his. I mean, so if you're a lawyer, don't even, if you have a client that escaped and came back, they're getting searched at least once a day, but maybe even multiple times a day. So that was, and again, like Joe said, you got the prior escape, and then you got the potential for a new escape. So I thought that definitely is spot on. Now, Joe, he's got it. This is where it becomes tough for the prison, by the way, because this is where it becomes costly. But I do think the county handles this cost, but I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure the county handles this cost, is that he still eventually is going to have to go back and forth to court. Now, usually if this was in the jail would be the one transporting him. But again, we're not really going to trust the jail to do that at this point. So now it's going to be it's probably going to be the state prison, the prison special operations group, because this is going to be a high level risk transport. So it's not going to be something that's going to be handed back over to the county. And usually, if they know the case is going to take a bit, they will usually remand the person over to the county. But I don't think that's going to happen. I think that what's going to wind up happening is this, and this is where it becomes risky too, is that they may just wind up doing the transports daily or as needed, because they may not trust the facility to hold them even for that short of time. So now that cost, but that also adds to the risk, because now you're, instead of you, transporting him, whatever, or distance wise. I don't know if the court, I don't know if Chester County Jail has a court close to the county jail itself, but once you get to prison, the moment he's got to go to court, they're going to be transporting him as requested or as court ordered. But I mean, high risk. What are we looking at? Who's going to be involved with that escort?
And that's a good question, because a lot of the times the counties, especially in Texas, the counties are responsible for their own. But again, it depends on what the contractual agreement was, or what the actual agreement was prior to him being placed in a state facility, if he was placed in a state facility. As far as court procedures go, if they were that concerned, especially if this guy has got a past escape history, evading arrests, whatever the case may be, they can do it over the television. They can do a Zoom virtual court meeting, right there. And he never even has to leave the facility. He could still be represented by his attorney. But yeah, it becomes an issue of who's responsible for what, and that can kind of turn into a kind of a mess there for a while, because, he's technically a county inmate, but he's in a state facility. If he escapes from state custody, they're ultimately,
Yep, right.
they're partially responsible, but he's still a county inmate.
I would still leave that. I mean, I don't know how it works in PA, but I would still, I mean, that's a big vulnerability, the transport. So I would still want that with the state at this point, because I think, to be honest with you, when it comes to this county, there's a loss of trust in just dealing with this high level inmate. And again, just this also to be generalized, but I said the story could be what motivates us, the one from PA. So I think, God forbid, they say, hey, we'll have the county do the transport, and something happens. There's a tremendous liability. I think that when the county hands it over to the state, when it comes to handling that inmate, they handle all functions, especially transports, because that is when we're pretty much bringing the inmate to the public. So I would not want to soften on that, but I would assume you would agree, Joe, on that, or?
Oh yeah, you definitely want a harder placement and a more restrictive transport team. In the event that he does have to leave the facility to go to a courthouse somewhere, you'd want to make sure that the facility is really secure, as close to the courthouse as possible. And I've even seen times where, guys that were so dangerous, they ultimately placed them in other states. They did an interstate compact transfer and placed them in other facilities just to get them out of their surroundings that they know, that they're familiar with, that they're comfortable with, and put them somewhere else. But a lot of that, communication is going to be the key on that. The jail administrator versus the warden of that facility, or, however the hierarchy, whoever does the placements, there's got to be some good communication as to who's going to be responsible for what. And, until the investigation is actually completed and, the ink's dry, I would definitely absolve the county from doing any transports with that offender, just to leave out any potential bias or any potential opportunities for this guy to do it again.
Yeah, and also as I said, when they do the transport, the county, if it is the state doing it, which should be the case, I mean, they would do it more like a special operations, or some high level trained transport team. So you're going to have a group of officers with a supervisor, maybe even one or two vehicles. Again, it's a high risk transport. So you're going to put all measures into the effect, because I'll guarantee you, when you have an escape, whatever that facility that person gets returned to, there's going to be a lot of eyes on them. So, the facility is going to want to operate at the highest level, because now you don't want the prison to fail at it either, because now, the system is losing credit and the inmate is gaining credibility. That's the last thing that you want. You don't want to kind of, again, what is it? Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. I mean, he already escaped from a county. Now, God forbid the state steps up and they can't handle this guy. And now the guy takes off again. The funny thing is, there'll be people, I know this may sound crazy because you do have a guy that's a danger to society, but there'll be people loving it because you fucked the system. Ultimately, that's how they see things. There's so much animosity towards the system. There are people that actually want the person to escape so they can show a flaw in the system. Now you got the county that couldn't do it. Now you got the state that couldn't do it. So you're going to put all measures on making sure that this person, when they're being transported, you're using the highest level of high risk. And I'll be honest with you. Another thing, guys, in case you may not realize, is that when he does get sentenced to state, because of that escape, inmates are able, if they, do well, they're able to kind of lower their status. There may be a good chance that even if he's the most ideal inmate, it could be years later, they still may say, yeah, we're not going to stamp that. So he's going to either maybe remain medium custody his whole sentence. Because at this point here, I'm not going to give you anything lower, because I'm sorry, however many years ago you did this escape, which means that you cannot be trusted to get any level lower than this level of restriction. Sometimes that's the case. Some states, they give the person 2 chances. And then there's a time, like, so basically, if you escape before you're ever considered for a lower level status, you have to remain in this status for a minimum of 3 to 5 years. But if you do it twice, done. You are never allowed a lower level status. It's the override that will basically prevent you from ever getting that full min, or to some extent, maybe even a community release. So at that point, what's going to wind up happening is the inmates may, depending on the state, may look for parole now, because parole doesn't care what status you're at. They'll just, tend to release you sometimes. And that's not a shot on them. I mean, it's the way the system may be moving sometimes. But I don't know. You have anything else you want to say in closing, Joe? Or, I mean, anything that you think we would have missed that we could add? I mean, it really goes, I mean, the basic premise is higher level of restriction, but still within the routine, of what they're allowed to have. And basically, for the facility that's getting them, all eyes are on you right now. We talked about the constant watch as soon as he comes in, for the safety of, the inmate. Obviously, you got to make sure he doesn't kill himself. We talked about how he's got to be separated. I mean, one, he is a threat, but the main thing is because he's a county inmate, not a state inmate. How we are still going to be investigating, the prior escape, and then obviously the potential for a new escape, the phone, the mail, he'll be on an alert list so people are aware to make sure they check his stuff more often. Anything else, Joe? I mean, the risk transports, obviously, the fact that the state should handle that. What else you got? Anything else before we close off?
That's really about it. From that point on, it's kind of out of our hands and pretty much up to the administrations. Of course, there's going to be an investigation involved, what they call a serious incident review, where they look at the physical plant or the physical layout of the facility to see, what policies and procedures were in place at the time of the escape. How did it occur? Why did it occur? Was it preventable? Is it preventable in the future? When an escape happens, there's a lot going on, especially when you have a multitude of agencies involved. But the main thing is to get them back in custody, keep them in a restrictive area, and definitely a confinable cell.
And also one other thing too, I also believe, especially at the very beginning here, when he gets off a constant watch. So a lot of prisons have centralized functions like libraries, chapel, food, going out to mess. Now, obviously, he's not going to be part of that. He is a jail inmate, and also he poses a threat. But the main thing is here, he's a jail county inmate. So you'll see a lot of those functions coming to him.
Exactly.
I mean, sometimes they could shut everything down, but most of the time it may be more efficient for the facility. If he's already getting the out of cell time, it's like, hey, listen, I'm not going to go ahead and send them to the library. I'll bring some books over here. Then he could pick from the books that we have, or if he has a request, we could work on getting him those books. It basically becomes like, I don't know, like an Uber or something.
Yeah, you're basically a DoorDash catering service at that point. But yeah, everything will generally come to him, whether it's, law library, the chaplain, maybe some medical visits. I'm sure there's going to be some times where, they require that he's going to have to come out, to go to medical. But yeah, for the most part, I'm pretty sure a lot of the activities are going to come to him.
Yeah, which, by the way, I mean, this is another good thing for why it's good to put it in the hands of the prison too, is because obviously these areas are usually I don't know if they're in different buildings, but different areas, so they're able to not have to sometimes lock down the whole facility to move this one individual. Again, that depends on the layout. Sometimes you have facilities that have multiple buildings. So if we're moving someone that's very highly restrictive, I only have to lock down this portion of the building because everybody I need is here to respond. So I'm able to still keep normal runnings happening on this side, kind of treating it as, two separate buildings or three separate buildings. So, if he does have to go to medical, you assume that's going to be a very controlled movement. You're going to assume that if that's the only area where there is an infirmary, that they're going to make sure that the other inmates are secured and that they can't either touch him and he can't touch them. So again, that's another thing, just within the facility, the amount of effort that's going to take to move him from point A to point B. So what I would do as administration is see what can be brought to him first. Because mind you, he's not in his cell. He could also be in the day area. So, what can we bring to him? And then for the stuff that we can't bring to him, that's the stuff that is okay. Well, we're going to have to maybe, make this more controlled. You're right. Medical's got to see him. He's got an appointment. Let's get him there. He's got a dental appointment. Let's get him there. But if he's by himself, some of those evaluations, because there's no other inmates around to hear anything, you could bring mental health to him, and they could talk all day because there's no violation. There's no one else hearing anything that they shouldn't be hearing. So, I would look as administration to see all the stuff that could be brought to him and then really try to facilitate that. And, if he wants to get books, he could purchase books or, have some books from the library brought over, chaplaincy. Let's visit him daily. Make sure that, we give him whatever those religious rights are, programming. And then one other thing, Joe, before you close, I thought this would be interesting. So once he gets sentenced and he's no longer a county inmate, he gets sentenced over to the state, and most likely he could remain at the same facility as long as there's no conflict before that. That's when it becomes tough, because then administration has to kind of start looking at moving this individual, or if you can't, being able to justify it each and every time, that you're not going to move them, because the lawyers will call. And here's the funny thing. This is where it becomes tough to balance, because you got the rights of the individual that some lawyers will believe that are being compromised, and you're going to kind of showcase that you're not. What are you talking about? What is he not getting? Tell me what he's not getting, and then we'll look into it. So, of course, well, what about he gets yard every day, restricted? But then they may say, well, he needs interaction with other inmates, and that's a big thing. That's a big thing. So now when he comes at the state level, they're going to expect the state, because now he's no longer county, to start introducing him back into some generalized setting. So you're able to, for the most part, to justify why, that you're able to provide these things to them. But then sometimes they start to push, and this becomes a tougher battle, is the interaction with other inmates. So now what's going to happen here is, as administration, it's funny because there's liability for signing them off too quick and introducing them to GP, and something happens. So you're not too quick to sign off on that. But then you got the rights. And if he starts to decompensate and stuff like that, and you're signing the refusals, your ass is also going to get put on the chopping block, possibly. It depends on where the pressure from the outside comes from. That's the scary thing too. It's funny how what's urgent from the outside makes us shift our priorities instead of just remembering what's important. In my mind, security is important. So I'm not looking to rush to get him out into some GP setting so he can interact with other inmates. I'm not looking to do that. I don't care how much pressure the lawyers push or whatever it is. We'll make the determination based on, safety and security. But there's always going to be that tough part to sign off. And for the person that's in that position, hopefully they stay true to the core values. But I have seen people fold on the pressure from the lawyers for whoever represents them, because as I said, they start pushing for inmate interaction, because at that point he's been isolated for however long. They expect this level of isolation to occur until he gets sentenced. When he gets sentenced and it gets turned over officially to the state, all the pressure now is going to turn into getting him into some level of GP setting, because at that point here, there is some level of discretion. So again, if you have to make that decision, I would say this, and this is just me, and you tell me if you agree. Sometimes you got to let it go to the courts and force them to make a certain decision. So I would still hold them there at least for a year or two, a few years, just to kind of get this person adjusted. Not building trust. You're not building trust, but you're working on figuring out what this person's about, what they're capable of doing. And then if you tend to get sued, let somebody force you to do it. So God forbid something happens, you have it on record that says, well, I told you he wasn't ready. I told you. Because I think the biggest thing that hits the fan is when you release him too soon, and then all eyes would go back on the facility, and that person who signed off on it will be the first person they come after. But what's your thoughts on that, Joe? Am I right about that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, that first year they should be kept under a constant microscope, especially if they've been convicted and sent to sentenced to penitentiary time. That first year I'd keep him in the most restrictive area that I possibly could. Even if it's a separation where it's 23 hours a day and he comes out for 1 hour for rec, and then he's able to come out for solitary or his solitude day room time. I'd be monitoring his mail, his phone calls, if he's eligible for any. A lot depends on the individual and their history. Do they have gang ties? Do they have, there's all kinds of variables for, whoever the poor bastard is, at the penitentiary level that's having to run a classification committee on him. There's a lot of variables to depend on. And it's even harder to do when you got outside political pressure putting pressure to you about, human rights and this, that, and the other, and, nobody's thinking about, well, damn, this guy just, gave us damn near a 2-week manhunt, broke into houses, stole this, got a weapon, got, knock on wood, he didn't hurt anybody. I just, the classification portion of it from the penitentiary standpoint is much tougher than the county jail standpoint. And, and like you said, it's not really building a level of trust, but it's seeing where this convict's mind is down the road.
Because again, for the prison, it's always long-term.
It's long-term. It's about the public safety.
It's about the public safety.
If this guy gets a life sentence, because I think he was in for a murder, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, he stabbed.
So, he's in for a murder, lifetime. He knows he's never going to see the light of day again. He is one of the most dangerous individuals in the penitentiary that day.
Right. And I just want to mention something. So we talk long-term outside of safety and security. We also have to do what's, what also works when it comes to the mental health and well-being of that inmate, and the funny thing is time doesn't always negate risk, because time could also be subjective. I mean, you've had people that were locked up and they were quiet for many years, and all of a sudden opportunity came and they went. We read those stories like that all the time. In 2015, you had the escape out of Dannemora that kind of notes people that did the right thing and, weren't a hassle. And then the moment the opportunity showed, they manipulated someone and they got out. So, I mean, we always have to be wary that when we cross our T's and dot our I's, that there is a balance. And again, all because the person's been quiet for 20 years doesn't mean they're going to be quiet for the 21st year or the 22nd year. So there's a lot of, Joe said it, there's a lot of decisions that go into play that if the person was to escape, the first thing they do is they look at, the level of status the person was in, and if it was a lower level status, who authorized that? What did they review when they decide that this was going to be a good spot for that individual? And again, I know some people may think that it's an easy process. It's, you're always saying no. Prison, to be honest with you, you have to justify your no's. That's the thing. So it's weird because I always teach my staff as rookies, and this really does matter as you start to move up, practice giving your no's. One is you have to stand by your no. So I like when you have rookies come in, they're very by the book at the beginning because they're learning how to say no. I get it. I love it. And that's a talent or a skill that you're going to take with you as you move up. But there's also another thing behind just standing by that no, is being ready to justify it. Because as you start to move up, when the world is giving these inmate yeses, you got to have someone out there saying, hold on, guys, that's going to be a no. Let me tell you why. But a lot of people get so concerned because the why, the justification, is what gets challenged. And a lot of them feel that if it goes to court, they're going to destroy me on that. Well, let me tell you something. Go to court. Let them destroy you if that happens, because it could happen. I'm not being an asshole. Hear me out, because you could have the best argument in the world, but they're never going to see things from your perspective. And trust and believe, the moment that you go to argue against it, they go back to some simplistic understanding of the profession that's not even near what reality is. So you're not going to be able to defend against that. You're just not. It's not even an argument worth defending. I gave you what it was. That's it. If you choose not to understand it, that's on you. I can't make it any simpler. And now if you're going to go against me, that's fine. I'm sad. I'm sad. But here's the funny thing. If something does happen, you forced my hands. That's the key, because I told you this would be a concern. So I think that the no's, a lot of people are afraid to give the no because the justification highlights a responsibility or an accountability for the person providing the justification, where the yes is like, well, everybody wants a yes, and I'm just going to go with the crowd. No, stand tall, defend what you believe, because it's a lot. It's crazy how, and it's in my book, by the way, this one right here, how we're so quick to sacrifice the important for what's urgent. Okay, so you have a legislator or someone from the outside, a lawyer, all of a sudden says, hey, this has to happen. Okay, well, it's important to keep them in this level of custody. But now because the lawyer says it's urgent to get him out, I'm not going to change. Someone has to tell me to do that. So I'm going to stay true to my guns until someone from the higher level authority tells me to do it. Because at the end of the day, and this is how the system works, sadly, is that when we have a concern and an inmate does escape, it's an embarrassment. 100% embarrassment, because that's our number one responsibility, is keep them in. So it's an embarrassment beyond belief. It loses credibility. It loses trust. But the sad thing is, even if it's a systematic concern, even if for some level of pressure that forced this individual to have lower level restrictions, or forced that individual to have these level of rights that opened up the opportunity for them to do something foolish, everybody looks to blame an individual because they want to clear the system. It's not the system that failed, it's Gangi. And we're going to address Gangi. Well, it wasn't Gangi. Gangi was pressured. So Gangi is going to keep on saying no, and I'm going to say no, and I'm going to say no. And if something does happen, Gangi is going to go back and show you, I said no. I said no. I said no. Don't put this shit on me. And I'm not doing it for a CYA. I'm doing it because sometimes the sad thing is, if you don't document your efforts, no one knows that they've existed.
Exactly. If it ain't on paper, it never happened.
Joe, what's your closing thoughts? That was a good dialogue, man. This was fun.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of responsibilities and a lot of variables that come with an escape. The biggest thing is to get them back into custody, obviously. To keep them in a safe environment for their protection and the public's protection. it's going to be interesting to see how this unfolds. I've kind of been watching it. The video was quite shocking on how he escaped. And I'm sure that, there's going to be physical changes at that facility as a result of it. So a lot of it will depend on what the serious incident review brings. But, never, you always got to think about the public safety first. Past escapes, especially the Lopez escape here in Texas, where, multiple lives were taken by this convict as a result of, I'm sure at some point down the line, some sort of classification, political pressure. And like Angie said, that there's multiple people that normally vote on the classification committee. One voice makes the difference. If it's a 3-person committee, one voice makes the difference. So, you got to do what's right, for the public safety. You got to do what's right for the agency, irregardless of outside pressure. The court system's always going to be the court system, and lawyers are always going to be lawyers. But, it's your voice ultimately that can make the difference between, safety or sadness. So, just keep it in mind when you're looking at the big picture of things.
Yeah, guys, I want to read something in my closing. It's coming out from my rookie book. I just want to read something because it really does reflect here. I kind of made up a term that I think makes sense. I want to read. I really kind of want to save the passages, but I do have 50, or it will be 50. But I want to read something. Let me just get it real quick. I think this matters. It's called where is it? Hold on. Let me just. It's pretty cool to see how much I've written so far. Wow. I'm going through it now. I'm looking for one specific. Right here. Safety and security is a layered process. So Russ gave the quote at the very beginning. What it says here is facilities and the staff therein use multiple levels and layers of fail-safes, firewalls, contingency plans, backups, and various redundancies to ensure public safety, staff safety, and inmate safety. Policies and procedures are built on the broken, weak links, the burnt-through firewalls, and the failures of your contingencies and plans. Your position and your duty are the first line of defense. Remember, you must not fail. And that's Russ's quote. I compliment it as well, but I thought the layered process matters because there is human error. And I think that when we go to justify our no, in the back of our mind, we may not want to express it. But when you have someone that, like myself, that's in a senior position, and I've been at the job for over 20 years, I may not express that I have outwardly, I have concern for human error. But sometimes when I want to justify a no, I want to allow that. I want to say, hey, guys, we're not perfect because we're human. We're going to make mistakes. So my job is I want to put this person in a position where it helps staff, do the job, not, expect staff to be overburdened by the job. I think there's a difference in perspective. And that doesn't mean I lower my expectations for my people, because that's not what it is. What it is that I also want to provide them for their best ability for them to be effective. So a lot of times people will want to put a person who's not ready for that level of least restriction. And they're like, well, don't worry, your custody should be there and your custody will watch them. I was like, yeah, but I also owe custody, the best chance to be effective. So granted, I don't want to go back and say I don't feel custody could do the job, because that's not the case. I think custody can do the job, but I think I'm failing at giving them the environment that is conducive for them to be the most effective. So having said that, when you have the people that are that create, like, you can move them forward and custody, I think you should shift the perspective. I think that we should make sure that when we move people forward, we take into account human fallibility. Have I done enough to help my staff be more effective? Because when a mistake happens, it's not just about staff making mistakes. It's also, was there something in the environment that allowed for this? So I just wanted to get it out there. I think that's something that we can even have a whole topic on, one day, because I'm not saying I don't believe in my staff. I just want to make sure everybody gets that. I'm saying I expect more from me as management to not put an inmate in an environment that makes it easy for them to take advantage of whatever these layered processes are that's explained in the book. That's on me. You know, I take onus on that. So again, I just thought that's an area that we've never really explored. And since that's a new thought, in all fairness, Joe, do you want to comment on that, or are you good? Because we never really said that before, but I would love to get your perspective.
Well, I mean, and you pretty much hit it. You pretty much hit it on the head. You know, human error. The human error aspect is always going to be there, no matter what. In any decision or any situation, there's going to be some bout of human error. But you know, the main thing is that we give them the ultimate environment, the best decisions, and something that's going to be more conducive for them to be able to do their jobs and keep these guys in custody. You know, there's going to be some sort of human error no matter what we do or where we go on a daily basis. You know, but and you're right, it's our responsibility as an individual. And, you know, I kind of take it personal too in some of the choices I make. You know, I don't just think about myself and my opinions or, you know, my beliefs. You know, I think of others. You know, what's going to keep them safe? What's going to make it, you know, better for them to do their jobs? Do they have all the tools? You know, so yeah, I'm definitely with you on that one.
All right, guys. And as always, guys, the show's Tigger. If you haven't, please subscribe, interact, engage, comment, hit that bell. Bell's going to notify you every time I post up a video. Stay safe.